Jacob, it's nice to have you here,
Thank
as
you.
always. Bill, it's really great to have you here. I'm sorry you missed the last few, but you're here now, and that's what counts. Um, all right, I think I'll wait one more minute for Sandy just to make sure, and then we'll get cracking. Antonio, how are you doing?
Wonderful. Busy with the family.
That's good. Good things to be busy with. And Billy, you and I had our little schmooze. The fact that you're here? I'm taking it as a sign that things calm down a little.
A little bit. This week none of the bosses are around, so it's a little easier to disappear for a while.
Aren't you the boss?
Well, I'm the boss over my department,
Gotcha.
so I'm in a complicated situation. Long story short, I'm the boss of my particular property for everything building related. And then I'm the assistant boss to anything building related across the company. And the company's 3 hotels, 60 apartments, and about 90 storefronts.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
way to go! Seriously.
It's not fun, to tell you that. But the bad thing is well, I don't know. Yeah, I have a 10th grade education, and I make more money than my wife with a master's degree as a school teacher. So, education is not always everything.
I'm sure Jacob has much to say. But yes, I see he's nodding now, even before I said anything. Lynn, hello. It's very nice to have you over here with us as well. I hope you're doing well. All right. 1 second. Okay, so let's get cracking. We were going through chapter 3 of idolatry. We stopped at number 15. Again, just as a reminder, and we'll speak about this probably many times as we go on, there are things that are obligations for Jews and Noahides, and then there are things that are recommendations for Noahides. And we should realize the difference. And while it is a recommendation and seemingly certain transgressions are frowned upon, but it's important to realize those distinctions because those differences are what allow rabbis in specific cases to allow for more lenient opinions because these are not obligations, and that is part of a more compassionate understanding of the context and the background Bnei Noahites are coming from. All right, so let's take it away with, you know what? Actually, before I jump into it, and the fact that I have Jacob over here, I was reading, Jacob, do you mind giving us a Svaria upload of Sanhedrin 97? So I want to also just speak about some of the major trends that are going around. So if one of them that we're participating in right now is the involvement and growth of the Noahide community. On the flip side, there is all this meaning crisis and the fact that we're all dealing with what seemingly is a morally corrupt society. So there's a Gemara that Rabbi Nehemiah teaches us. Let's scroll down. He talks about the generation of, go back up. I think we're there already. Scroll up, a little further up. Yaakobim Mugatu. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's just read it in English. Jacob, you could take it away.
The sages taught in a Braita Tanaitic stating. With regard to the 7-year period, i.e. the sabbatical cycle, Messiah.
Sorry. A little further down. More. It should be Rabbi Nehemiah talking.
Rabbi Noahide says.
Here we go. Yeah, there you go. Okay. I wonder what the English translation is.
It is taught in a Tanaitic statement that Rabbi Nehemiah says, during the generation that the son of David comes, arrogance will proliferate. So that's why. And the cost of living will corrupt people so they will engage in deceit. The vine will produce its fruit, and nevertheless the wine will be costly. And the entire Gentile monarchy will be converted to the heresy of Christianity. Interesting.
I don't wait. What does it say in Hebrew there? I don't know, but it should say minut maybe. Leminut.
Leminut. Yeah. So sectarianism. This is Stein Zaltz's translation.
Correct.
And there will be no inclination among the people to accept rebuke.
Right. I guess you could stop there. So if we're all here because we believe and are connected to the divine story, and if we look at data points like the fact that we're even having this conversation now in 2023, talking to real live Noahides, which for many people was probably something they never thought they would actually see when Maimonides was talking about this almost 1,000 years ago. However, you could also see items like this, like Rav Nehemiah is telling us over here, where we could see that, and you could even see this in the Renaissance in Europe, how the kingdoms of the world, so to speak, or the governments of the world, get lost and start, going into this Sam Harris land, heresy land. And in a certain sense, we get nervous about this because there's a sense of a loss of meaning. But perhaps these two are indications of there needs to be a stage where we get to there's no faith at all, where you have people talking about woke ideologies, when you have university presidents saying that you have to put anti-Semitism into context, when you have a world that is completely upside down. These potentially are also hints for it's always darkest before the dawn, right? So hopefully things like this, I happened just to see this yesterday, which made me think about it, but seeing things like this on one hand and your participation here and obviously in your own life, in your own communities, to me is a beautiful sign that we are at the generation of the son of David. Please God. I hope that was okay. I just wanted to throw that in there. All right. Antonio, do you want to start us off with 15, 16, 17? Obviously starting with 15.
Yeah. Being present at or passively participate in idol worship ceremonies is not forbidden to Noahides. A Noahide who is forced to engage in idol worship or is likely to be endangered for refusing to do so is permitted to participate and is not obligated to give up his life to avoid said idol worship. It is forbidden to incite others to engage in idol worship.
All right, so there's a difference over here between Noahide and Jews, and for where does this disappear? Okay, here we go. So being present for Jews, there's really no real accommodation for this, and this, in a certain sense, is also because when Jews are being looked at, we never ever want to be seen as someone that's transgressed, even if that's not the case, right? There is something called marit ayin, that you don't know how people are going to perceive this and see this, and if they see a Jew in a place like this, or participating even passively in a place like this could be misconstrued. And Judaism is very, very aware of this and stresses this specifically. However, with regards to Noahides, there's, we don't have this safeguard, so to speak. And again, even in Judaism, the fact that we have this safeguard is for one not to be even tempted to potentially get mixed into these problematic situations. But as we said, for Noahides, it's recommended to use common sense, right? So there's no reason for you willy-nilly to be walking into, we'll use a church right now for no reason, just to sit there and appreciate it. On the flip side, though, weddings, funerals, there's a family dynamic you have to take into consideration. And that's why, again, there's a safeguard that we're saying we recommend. However, tensions between a husband and wife, tensions between family members, Judaism and the Torah is not looking to create more havoc in one's family. Rather, they are asking with open arms for one to come close and engage with the Torah, and specifically the 7 Noahide laws, and with slowly but surely connect to create your own community and connect to the Jewish community as well. But that needs to be done in a sensitive manner. So again, we're hearing here that it's not recommended, but for each of you, and of course, as I always say, if there's specific scenarios or questions that you guys have, we could, of course, bring it up the ladder to the rabbis, and they will gladly give us an answer if there's anyone that has a specific question that they're dealing with or a dynamic that they're dealing with. Number 16, just to go through this again, a Noahide who is forced to engage in idol worship or is likely to be endangered for refusing to do so is permitted to participate and is not obligated to give up his life to avoid said idol worship. So we have two footnotes over here that I think are also worth to read. But first, I would mention how there's the 3 cardinal sins in Judaism, and bloodshed, idol worship, and incest.
Sexual immorality.
Sexual immorality, excuse me. And we could see over here that initially we're not asking from the Noahide to give his life, okay, for this. And this is also because this goes back to, like I was saying, there's more leniency over here because there is a different requirement. And we're not going to ask you to give up your life in this specific case. For Jews, we don't have to get too deep into this, but in a certain sense, it's almost too devastating for the soul to be participating in this, with taking into consideration that there is a relationship that this Jewish soul has been cultivating for a very long time. And like we see in the story of Daniel, right? So he's being asked to do idol worship, and he decides to forgo his life. Miraculously, he survives. Same with his 3 amigos. They're also, thank God, survived. But their attitude was, yes, we're going to give our life for this. However, for Noahides, idolatry in this certain sense is possible to be rectified in a certain sense, because the Torah is asking the Noahide to value his life in this sense more and continue the relationship with God afterwards. And that's why, in this sense, participating in this idol worship in this case could turn that sin for a Noahide into a mitzvah, because he's doing. Sorry,
and we see this in the Bible in the story of Naaman.
And we see this go ahead, expand, Jacob.
So there's this guy Naaman, which in Hebrew actually means someone who is faithful, and he comes to Elijah, I believe, and there's a whole thing where he asks Elijah, and Elijah heals him, and then he says when he goes back, he has to participate in the idol worship of the king he serves, and Elijah says to him, "Go in peace." Says to him, "That's fine." Yeah, basically.
I'm going to go back to the king, who I serve, and I have to participate in that. And he says, in that context, I understand. So that also dovetails with footnote 58 and 59. Antonio, do you mind just reading these highlighted sections?
There are those who, in their precise reading of Rambam and Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Melachim 10:2, hold that even where financial loss is threatened, leniency is advised.
Right, so we're saying, okay, only if I lose my life. Jacob has give once an example of this, of his friend that needed to paint a chapel or something like that. And here, in a certain sense, it's like, what if I lose? This is like the commission of the year, right? I have the mortgage is resting on this, the house is resting on this. So in a certain sense, here too, we see what is threatening one's life. That could even be threatening one's livelihood in a certain sense, even from like a monetary perspective. Let's move on to 59.
However, Ramban and Sefer Milchamot Hashem, I don't know the rest of that, holds that a Noahide is obligated to give up his life rather than worship an idol or perform a sexually illicit act in public.
Okay, so here we see a different opinion that brings us much closer to the Jewish requirement. And it says, no, in this case, if a Noahide has anteed up and is playing in the big leagues, then the requirement is the same, right? And in this case, the understanding would be you, in a certain sense, at that level have been grafted in. And that's why the attitude is that, yeah, even your soul, it's too devastating for it to be participating in idol worship. And one would have to give his life in that case. So again, and we'll see this in a few other places, obviously in Judaism, but also in the Noahide Torah, there are different opinions. We're not scared of this tension, right? We see this tension as something that is healthy and something that allows people to find their place. Trey, you had a question. It's good to have you here too, buddy.
This is a legitimate question. So there's I forgot the movie. There was like a real life example of this where two priests went to Japan, and basically every single day, all the Japanese Christians were being tortured, and they basically required these two priests to basically kiss a pagan idol, for them to be for the Christians to stop being tortured, and eventually one of them did it. So would that in that example, would that have been the correct thing to do? To basically kiss an idol to save other people's lives, or would you just have to keep on silent?
Well, again, it would be like in the context over here of saving other people's lives. If you don't do so, is different than giving up your own life, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're not. So the usual case is either I kill you or I kill this other person. Right? You're not allowed to have this other person die for you because your soul is not worth more than his. In this case, it's saying your soul or the souls of others over here, multiple others, that potentially would be different. And then again, you would have to see which opinion you're going here according to. One would say, yes, definitely do so. Kiss the idol. It's not a big deal. And even more so, you could, in this sense, again, you said this is a priest. So am I correct? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah,
this was
the movie is called Silence.
Again, as far as the priest is concerned, maybe I misunderstood you, but what is the tension with him kissing this idol? Isn't it like it's like a statue of Jesus, or this is like some other pagan idol?
Yeah, this is a pagan idol.
See,
is this priest a Noahide? Like what's the
Well, no, I guess like this, like, so let's say somebody was, let's say there was a group of Noahides, and basically one of the persons was saying, the like leader of the Noahides was saying, we need you to kiss these idols, or we're going to keep torturing these Noahides. Would it be a good thing, basically, to kiss the idol or not?
Okay, so
go ahead, Jacob.
There's several things going on here. One of which is, Trey, you are using Noahide in the sense of any Gentile, as opposed to somebody who has decided to follow the laws of B'nai Noah the way we talk about it here. Now, just to keep clear, anytime you're studying halachas like we are here, the actual application requires circumspect integration of everything, right? So, for example, let's say you are a Noahide leader, right? And this is a public act. Well, then there's all kinds of other considerations that might come in addition to whether or not it's okay if your job depends on you working inside of a church and just being a passive participant while people have their ceremonies, right? Or let's say even a Hindu temple and being a passive participant. So when we're talking about the individual precepts here, concepts here, right? Like whether or not a Noahide is required to give up his life, right? And actually, so Rabbi Pinchas Levin was teaching this as well from Brit Shalom, and he wasn't so sure because he seems to think that maybe Noahide in fact should be willing to give up his life, right?
Like the Rambam,
right?
But Jacob, like you're just saying, I just want to add, like the Rambam says, if you look at footnote 59, right, he says, is a Noahide is obligated to give up his life rather than worship an idol or perform sexual illicit act in public. And then the note over here, I didn't highlight it, where it says that is in the presence of 10 Jews, right? So this already creates a different scenario. Like you said, if this leader, is this happening in front of Jews? Is it happening in public? Where is this happening?
Right. And so, I mean, when we talk about an individual situation, this is really important whenever you're going through a halachic book to realize that we're learning various precepts, various things to keep in mind. And then when it comes to actually living your life, you have to consider, these are the various things that are very important, right? So maybe me losing my job would be not a huge deal because it's just me, as opposed to somebody who has a wife and kids, and losing their job is a much bigger situation than if you're not married with kids, right?
Can I interject a little bit?
Of course, Bill. Not only can you, please do.
So, take my situation, right? I'm a licensed foster parent through the state of North Carolina. I cannot prohibit any foster child from practicing their religion in my house. So if a Buddhist shows up, I have to allow Buddha in my home. I don't see a problem with that because I'm still giving them safety and a place to live and food and so on and so forth. So if you take a hard line on this, it would require me to stop doing good in my community to avoid contact with idols.
And so, Bill, before I respond specifically to what you say, I just want to add something to what Jacob said. It is very common in Jewish communities and circles that a rabbi might give one answer to one person and a different answer to someone else, what seemingly was the same question. But the rabbi is sensitive enough to know, like Jacob said, this person is dealing with this specific deal, and that's why I'm going to X, Y, Z. What is his heritage? What is his lineage? Can I now access for this person Sephardic opinion? Can I access for this person Ashkenazic opinion? So these are all things that need to take into consideration when one answers, and just one doesn't give an answer, a sweeping answer for everyone. Specifically what you're saying, Bill, and we're seeing this live in these questions, there are opinions that could come, like you just said, with a hard line with regards to what some of what you just articulated. However, that's when it comes into a person asking with himself, like, okay, is this the ideal? Do I want to continue allowing for this to happen or not? How long would that process take for me to, let's say, wind off of that if I wanted to or not? And during that process, I'm going to remind myself that these are not obligations for a Noahide, rather a recommendation. And that then gives me more flexibility. However, one shouldn't look at that as like, oh, Billy Ray's using loopholes. Rather, in the Billy Ray specific scenario, this is how it best fits for him to be participating. That doesn't mean, though, that one isn't constantly trying to get closer and move further away from idol worship as possible. That doesn't mean one has to do so immediately in 1 second, and even removing himself from it could look different for different people in different contexts. But again, obviously, Billy, as you get to more specific cases, then it starts getting easier to pinpoint answers. And like I said, if you do have specific cases, we'll obviously take them up the chain of command. Any other comments or moving on?
I just had one question. If it's too much, we can skip it. Why are these rabbis coming up with such different views on the punishments? Like, and I guess to a deeper question, like, why, like, what makes idolatry bad? Maybe that's too big, but
there's a difference between idolatry and let's say heresy. Heresy specifically, there's a certain sense where, like, idolatry, there's a truth to it, because, you know, recognizing the powers in the world is a certain level of understanding of the relationship one has with God, but you want to see the unmoved mover behind it all, right? So as far as Jews are concerned, we're only looking at the source. That doesn't mean that we can't recognize the divine sparks in idol worship as well, in a certain sense. Where heresy becomes more problematic, or Judaism is more sensitive to it, is because once it attaches itself to a truth, for example, like in Christianity or in Islam, when they're attaching themselves to a Jewish truth, that starts becoming more compelling in a certain sense, and that also becomes a little more tempting in certain cases as well. So the rabbis are specifically sensitive to what they call over here minut, or Christianity, because they're aware that this is idol worship that has attached itself to Judaism, and because of that, it's a lot more potent. All right, 17. It is forbidden to incite others to engage in idol worship. So that would seem very clear. I think what's sort of behind this is a more fundamental question. Is one should always ask themselves, how do you even know if you're right? Right? Let's put aside the fact if you can or can't incite people. Who are you to get on your, what is that called in England, the speaker's corner, or step on your soapbox and start telling people, like, this is the true God? So you definitely, one has to do a lot of self-reflecting and introspection before he starts talking to others and affecting others. But the sense over here is just how we're so intense about the individual playing around with idol worship or idolatry. So you, of course, should be very careful about affecting others. And again, these are all taught in the negative, but we always say, remember, we could always flip this around and look at this in the positive. So here it's saying, be very careful, because what you say could affect others. On the flip side, if you are telling people to get closer to God, pray, participate in your community, those also have an effect, and those are, of course, wonderful. And definitely people should be taking part of that as well, paying it forward constantly.
So that might be a question. I did write and ask a specific personal aspect question to a rabbi and understand the answer on that. But on what you're just on point 17, my lovely internet fixer also falls under the category of disability and other things. So we've had some discussions about my Noahide study to the degree that he can understand what I explained about why. And where the discussion got left was because there's also a lot of fears around switching gears from what has been so far worked out in the world, even related to healthy foods in a general North American context. Okay, repetition, autism basically, and other things. So where we left it was, I said, you've been able to pray and talk to God. Talk to him about this. Decide what, where you're at, what you think. He gave me a brief answer, and I'm going to leave it there for now because I don't know what else to do. Because, well, for one, also like in the course of the last 10 years of working things out before I brought this in, I now have one atheist son and one son who keeps looking at me going, are we still okay? Are we still okay? So I've decided to leave are we still okay where it sits.
Okay, Sandy, you're going all over the place, which is okay sometimes. Really. But
okay,
let me try to. If I understand you correctly, you're talking about specifically,
17.
Yeah, and guiding your children, right? And I mean, when it comes to your own children, that becomes a very complicated thing where you have to consider, okay, your influence and that child's history. And so, when it gets to be that particular, that becomes something that's like, okay, this is something you have to talk through with people, because I mean, especially your kids, your one of your kids has special needs, so that's very, very particular.
I guess I'm avoiding saying, do I need to take the same question to the rabbi on his behalf that I did on mine, or do I just sort of leave it where it is, which is what I chose to do?
I would generally say, don't take too much responsibility for other people, especially if they're adults. Other people's spirituality. God takes care of everyone, and while we try to help other people as best we can, we can never take responsibility for other people's spirituality, because that is their relationship with God and something we can't really interfere with, really.
Okay, and so basically, in an extremely awkward way, I think I said that's what I chose to do rather than seeing it as 17 said, where I'm like recommending worship of idols or other than God. Because I'm kind of going, talk to God, explain this in whatever way you can. Talk to him yourself.
I think, like Jacob said, obviously specific cases become a little more complicated depending on the situation. But I was going to say practice what you preach, but we're talking about not preaching right now. But practice, do, embody, and that someone seeing you act in that fashion and someone seeing you act in the ways of God has a great effect. And the more questions he asks, the more he gets invited into that conversation, and then the more specific questions he asks, you will feel perhaps it'll perhaps be easier for you to answer him or engage at that level. But we'll see.
It involves 2 to 3 languages. Let's just put it that way.
So it'll be a longer process, but you'll keep us updated how it goes.
Yeah, I just was saying I don't think I have fallen into misstepping on 17. I don't think so, but if I was,
I don't think so. Also, and at the very least, remember, if you're not sure about it yet, then you're definitely in the safe zone, because the requirement isn't read 17 once and then have it singed into your head and know it and you're committed to it. Like, this is the process and we're on it. So don't fret yet. Just right now, we're trying to identify the path that God wants us to take. These questions are all good and they're in the right place, and they're coming from the right place as well. It's a healthy doubt. All right, moving on. Number 18. Trey, since you came with us, you're going to read 18 and 19, whether you like it or not. It's happening.
Okay.
Sorry, 1819. Do you need me to make it
Whoever
bigger?
whoever prophesies in the name of idol worship commands people courting is in violation of Noahide law. It is forbidden to erect a monument, plant a tree, or construct a building designated for idol worship, even if the one building or planting does not engage in said idol worship.
Okay, so very interesting. Number 18 is fascinating. Again, like we spoke about last class about recognizing the truth in the fact that the sun has power and the moon has power. Here too, we're being told you got to keep away from these false prophets or these problematic prophets. And you would ask yourself, isn't that all gobbledygook? And the answer is no. That God specifically tells us this as well, that prophets will come and he's doing so to test us. And if they were just talking nonsense or they would be very foolish, it wouldn't be much of a test. However, now if a prophet comes, doesn't matter what gender he is, what color he is, what height he is, if he's prophesizing about the word of God and telling us and showing us miracles and talking about the Torah, and then it's all good in the hood because he's just connecting himself back to the Torah. And we don't have an issue with that because we know what those specifications are. The question is if someone's coming and giving us a different story, one that sounds familiar but different, and different certain key components are missing or have been changed. So here we are being told we must be wary of this. We must be careful, and we must take our relationship and religion very seriously. God is not looking for us to have a relationship with a knockoff, right? We want the real deal. Like my son says, when I come home with Pokemon that are fake, he's not happy, right? He wants the real deal. And somehow he has a great eye. He knows, like, I'll take it. He's like, don't even open up the bag, Abba. This is fake. I was like, all right, and I was like, catch it if you can.
Chazzy, if you make the page not as tall, if it's possible, it'll be bigger on the page.
Gotcha.
And Lynn says, as a parent, it's easy to use control of our kids. I've been practicing giving the control to God, and I would say that's really important. And a major difference between Judaism and Christianity is we do not take responsibility, as even for our own kids, we do not take responsibility for other people's relationship with God. People have a personal relationship with God that is not really up to us to do.
Thank you, Jacob. All right, 19. It also relates to, I see we lost Bill, so I hope he's out there in the ether still listening. But number 19 relates to this as well, which is, okay, here we're seeing, it would be clear, again, building this monument or planting this tree, right, that's designated for idol worship, so obviously big no-no. Now, what's interesting over here is we're being told that even one building or planting does not engage in said idol worship, right? This is just Joe Schmo the contractor. I'm just building this. I was commissioned to build this huge cross right now. I have nothing. I'm an atheist, right? I don't even care about this, but this is what they gave me. This is the file, right? Like, for example, when I design for carpentry, I send it to carpenters, and it's something called CNC. It's like this laser cut inside wood. So I can make all these different shapes. So let's say I'm a carpenter and I get right now a design. Someone wants me to CNC crosses all over for these doors for the church, right? So we have to realize that we're being told over here that our actions have an effect, even if we didn't intend them to have an effect, right? I'm just doing these doors. Someone might see these doors and say, wow, this is gorgeous. This is amazing. These are the most inspiring doors in the world. These doors have made this church the strongest church in the world. There's a story. This is very different, obviously, but there are the doors in the temple, these brass/copper doors called the doors of Nicanor. And Nicanor built these doors for the temple. But on the way, there was a big storm and they fell off the boat. And Nicanor was devastated because he was waiting in Israel. And then in the port of Jaffa, he saw something shining in the water. And then he found the doors, and they floated all the way to Israel. And he brought them, and they erected them and installed them in the temple. But the point being is Nicanor, I don't know how much he thought about it at the time, but some of these doors became an inspiring story if anyone came and seeing it. So here too, the carpenter just clicked enter on the file that does the cross, but we don't know how our actions are going to affect these things. So here too, we're saying this is not forbidden like a transgression that a Jew has to deal with again, but this is the recommended behavior. And on the flip side, again, because this is being told as the negative, if I build a community, if Bill has his foster home, these kind of erections of monuments or buildings or institutions also have a profound effect, a positive one. So we're being told over here time and time again to realize that not only are there physical ramifications to what we do, but there are spiritual ramifications as well to the way we act, even if we don't necessarily intend so as well. I'm just going to mention, though, now I'm in Noahide, and I'm going with my family to go visit Graham Gam's grave. And Graham Gam's grave has a cross on it. Can I clean it off from dust and from cobwebs? Right? So you could be like, really, 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 you shouldn't even be necessarily engaging and playing with the cross, because we already said it's bad. But now I'm clearly not doing it because I love the cross, and I'm doing it out of respect for my parents, and I want my kids to see that I respect my parents and that everyone's over here together. So in that kind of case, there are rabbis that are going to tell you, yeah, it's okay. Go there beforehand, clean the cross, make sure it looks nice, because we understand that this is not, you're not trying to engage with it in that kind of relationship. And there too, you would have to ask yourself, what does that mean? Am I just dusting it, or am I buying polish, lighting lights and candles? And then I'm already going into something we spoke about last class, which is lighting incense, bowing down. Those are already different actions which are requiring me this physical action, which has a much more intense impact and effect, which we are prohibited from. So again, one has to take these things into consideration and put them all into the proper into the proper context. I'll just give one more example of famous safeguards. So in Judaism, we can't eat the chametz, the leaven bread. Yeah, leaven bread on the Passover. But the word is called chametz, chet mem tzadik. A certain safeguard that some people will take is don't even eat food that the name sounds like the prohibited food. So let's say there was some cream called leaven. They'll be like, don't eat that either, because you'll get confused, right? So the Noahide doesn't necessarily have to take that on, right? That's not, you're not being asked to do that, but there are these safeguards that keep you extra safe. There is a difference when one looks at the safeguard as what God commanded him to do, and then you're at that point you're getting a little confused. On the other hand, it's wrong to just assume all these safeguards are not necessary and I'll be fine on my own and I don't need anything else. So these safeguards are put in there to really protect us. They're aware of human nature as well. All right, Jacobin, do you want to take us into proper conduct? The little blurb over there in 2021.
Many matters associated with idol worship are forbidden to Jews in order to distance themselves from it. Such matters were not explicitly forbidden to Noahides, yet these guidelines, as described below, are fitting for one to follow to the greatest possible extent.
So that's just a nice way of saying what I just said earlier about the leaven. So here too, there are things that are not forbidden to the Noahides, but these guidelines are fitting, but again, in context, right? So when there's that sense of like, oh no, did I just transgress? No, you didn't. Yes, you could keep on working on yourself. Yes, you should do better for yourself, but you're not in danger, so to speak, right? So there's this understanding and this relationship happening. Jacob, 20.
Refrain from reading books of idol worship. However, it is appropriate for Noahide sages who give instruction in these matters to read such books.
Okay, so the reason we don't want to read these books initially are because the fear of getting confused, like I said, about heresy over here. At what age is one doing this? There's something called limalet keres, filling one's belly. So you would say you need to make sure your toolkit is full with the relevant teachings and knowledge before you want to engage into novel things that might seem very confusing to you. So we are trying again here to create a safeguard that someone doesn't transgress. Now, on the flip side, we obviously know that Maimonides, the Rambam, read many of these books and was very involved with these books. Now, he says he came and said, I did this reading for you, Jews of the world, so you don't need to do this, right? Like I put myself in harm's way, and this is because I've already felt that I was, and he obviously was also a unique person, but felt that he was safe enough to participate in such things. And he tells us about these things as well. There's another understanding over here, which just lets you know what you're going to be spending most of your time on is eventually going to affect you, right? So you could be reading all these heretical philosophical books all day thinking there's not going to have any effect on you, but that's not the case. If that's what you're spending all your time thinking about, eventually that is going to create some sort of effect on you as well. Now, we of course realize, like with Jacob over here, Jacob is someone that is clearly reading the New Testament. And Jacob is someone that is reading many other books. And you can be like, well, Chazi, isn't that problematic? Isn't that prohibited? There is something called da ma tashiv la pikorus. Know what you would respond to the heretic. Now, you could read this as what you would respond to the heretic coming from outside, and also what you potentially would respond to the heretic from within, the interior heretic as well. So when you look at let's say using Jacob in context over here, Jacob engages with his New Testament knowledge, not in bolstering Jesus, but rather in making his $5,000 bet or talking about Acts 5 or constantly hammering these points, right? It's Acts 5. I'm not making that up, right? It's Acts 5. Constantly engaging in these conversations, right, with Father Stephen DeYoung, but no one is confused right now. It looks like Stephen DeYoung got him. Next week, he might be a Christian, right? Like he is clearly engaging. He's reading these texts and he's pushing back. So there's a sense where, again, generally speaking, not recommended in specific contexts, in specific age groups. There's more leniency to this. I'll just add that, let's say for a Noahide, you could be like, listen, I'm just looking around. I'm looking at these books. I'm just interested. There is a famous parable of a guy that runs into a pharmacy and he starts handing everyone medicine, right? And so it's true that like the medicine is made to heal, but if it's going to the wrong people, then it's not only not going to heal them, it's also going to create them harm. We don't know the dosage, right? And the only person that knows that is the doctor. So there's a sense where you might be looking at some other religion or other philosophy thinking like, oh, there's truth over here. But is it truth that's relevant to you? Is it the right dosage for you? And Judaism is what we claim and what we believe is offering you the right dosage, is offering you the right prescription. So playing around with different ideas, while lofty, could also be very, very problematic and also detrimental to one's spiritual self as well. Lastly, we'll just focus on what they said over here about the Noahide sages, these mysterious folk. So the books that the Brit Olam, the World Noahide Center in Jerusalem would recommend, generally speaking, is the Brit Shalom and Brit Olam, right? The prayer book and this halacha book. And that also includes the divine code and any really halacha book written for Noahides. Mesilat Yesharim, which is something maybe that we would study in the future. It's also like a very fundamental book. And the book of Kuzar, the Kuzari book, which is also a fascinating book discussing this story, which we believe to be historically true, that there is this king that he went through a whole journey of exploration, religious exploration, and eventually he decides to take on Judaism, him and his whole people. And this is a discussion that was written out a couple hundred years later, talking about what this looked like and what this discussion was. So these are books that the sages should be familiar with. One should realize that if the sage is familiar with Brit Olam, he's also familiar with the footnotes that we're reading over here. And those footnotes expand to many, many other topics, to Talmud, to Mishnah. So we are telling the Noahide, don't jump into the deep end and be learning every single thing the Torah is offering right now. However, focus on what's relevant to you, and you'll see that more and more will be exposed from the Torah as you go on and on and on, because ultimately all these things are intertwined and interconnected as well. Jacob, I hope you didn't take any offense of me using you as an example of someone.
I am very, very offended. Life as we know it has ended.
21. Sandy, you want to take this one?
Sure. It is fitting to refrain from praising idol worship, and even more so from decorating a display of it or lighting candles to honor it, or engaging in any such related activity. All this concerns activities not explicitly constituting idol worship. However, activities explicitly constituting idol worship are entirely forbidden by Noahide law.
Right. So the last, first of all, thank you for that, Sandy. The last line of here is what's, it's a recurring theme, right? We obviously know that these explicit acts are forbidden for Noahides as well, and obviously for Jews as well. And then we're saying it's fitting to refrain, right, from praising idol worship. So this also is interesting because in our channel, in Jacob's channel, and in the TLC, there is a lot of while we call it a brave space, there's still a lot of very cordial dialogue, and seemingly some people could look and say like, whoa, it looks like Jacob is saying fantastic, at certain times saying great things about Christianity, or Chazi's saying very nice things about Christianity, or we're having this discussion. So first off, we have to realize that there's a difference between appreciating Christians as people and validating them as humans to the religion itself. Right. So Christians can be fantastic people, and we don't have an issue with those people. Of course, they're fantastic people. They're made in God's image, and we love them all. Number two, thinking about how we could recognize that Christianity and Islam, like Maimonides says, are path makers, right? That these obviously all comes from God in a certain sense. So while we could look at these as transgressions or heresies, we could still identify the fact that they are still manifesting due to God's desire in a certain sense, and they're here to clarify and create a pathway towards the Messiah. Lastly, I'll say, which is controversial because not everyone agrees with his opinion, but let's say Rabbi Cook, which Jacob loves, talks about how that there's going to be a time where the other religions, there's a process of the other religions being corrected and brought up to the Jewish standard in a certain sense. And then we want them to keep their unique religious experience as a culture. I'll be with you in a second, Trey. However, we still want to create there's room for corrections. As I spoke about in the past, we hope that when the temple is built, the other world religions come with their theological suitcase and come to the rabbis and say, okay, this is how I've been practicing. And the rabbis, with their wisdom, will say, okay, these 7 things are fantastic. We don't do it that way, but you keep on doing it that way, and your culture connects to that way. That's great. These 4 things, hell no. These 2 things, we got to tweak them out as well. And you could see Christianity in a certain sense. I don't know if Jacob would agree with this. I think he would, but like characters like Father Stephen DeYoung are definitely indications of step in the right direction, where you could see that Christianity is recognizing his Jewish roots, taking a lot of these things on. I forgot what that name is. What is his name? Words on Fire? Father Barron? Stephen?
Father Bishop Barron, yeah.
So he just had, I think today, him and Ben Shapiro had this little interaction about Christmas. And there too, Bishop Barron talks about how we have to see Jesus as a Jew. We have to read it in the context of all the Jewish scripts. So again, obviously there's still a wide gap between us, but that kind of conversation is in the right direction. So that's not me saying Christianity is A-okay, but that's me recognizing the elements of truth in there and appreciating those things. Islam, unfortunately, has yet to begin that process. I hope they do so soon. Trey, thank you for waiting patiently. Hit us.
Sorry about that. So what are we defining as idolatry? Because when I think of idolatry, I'm thinking of it in the biblical context, thinking of like the Canaanites and everything like that, where their form of idolatry was completely contrasted to biblical ideas, temple prostitution, like everything bad that they're doing. But it seems that like idolatry today is a sort of Judeo-Christian idolatry. Does that make sense? Like all the bad stuff associated with idolatry isn't really going on.
I was actually going to mention this. So Chezi, whenever this is talking about idolatry, since we are generally talking about Christianity, we're talking about Christianity. Now, Hinduism is obviously a much, much bigger problem than any form of Christianity, right? And I would say, for example, statues of Mary or Jesus are a much, much bigger problem than, saying the Our Father prayer, which I think is just plain fine, right? So you have to understand, what do we mean by idolatry? And generally, what I would say Judaism says is idolatry is ascribing anything to God, ascribing godliness to anything that is not purely God himself. So the most pure way to address God is to say you, right? And there are times when, so this gets into the whole question of the sin of Enosh and what Maimonides says in the Laws of Idolatry, chapter 1, which I highly recommend everybody read, including Noahide, right? And which Chezi has mentioned much of that already. So there is an idea that, yes, God created the world, God created things in the world, God created holy things in the world, right? So when I kiss or bow towards a Torah scroll, that's not idolatry. Well, why isn't that idolatry? Because I recognize that Torah scroll is not God, right? I realize that Torah scroll is merely something that is representing God in the world in some way, right? And yes, this can get really fine hair splitting, right? Especially when you're talking about Christianity, which has spent many years trying to fit their ideas of Trinity and stuff into Jewish biblical concepts. But ultimately, if you think of anything other than God as God, that's idolatry. Even if that's love, right? If you're like, I worship love, it's like, sorry, idolatry.
So it seems like an interesting phenomenon because you're not really prescribing what the actions are. You're prescribing the mental state, and you're not saying what they're testifying as their mental state. It seems what the rabbis are testifying as their mental state. Is that correct?
I just mentioned, Trey, last class we spoke about the prohibitions are incest, buying down, libations. So it talks about specific, and we correlated those to, sacrificing an animal, which is cutting the windpipe, and that's the food we eat. That's representing sort of spiritual and what comes out of our mouth. And there's the fact of libation is pouring yourselves out fully with your body. So these are all these, like you said about in biblical times, these are really fully committing both spiritually, mentally, intellectually, and physically to this kind of act. So there's one level which they're saying off the bat, no. Then intentionality comes into, okay, what if I'm not bowing down to something, but I think this is nice. And that's where intentionality starts coming in. So I would even say, even using the word God, we spoke about this last week, could also be problematic. What does that word mean to you, right? God, even that word, even the words we use, these are terms that are limited at the end of the day. So like Jacob said, one kissing the Torah scroll is not problematic if one is oriented properly. If someone thinks the Torah is God, then you start getting into a dangerous zone, because then you're not oriented properly, and that goes based on intentionality. It's less about the fact that you're kissing the Torah scroll. It's more about where your mindset is at that point.
Let me move one step up out,
Sure.
Which I think will address your question better, Trey. Ultimately, your relationship is with God, and God is the one who's going to judge. That's how it is. The question becomes, when you're trying to figure that out and understand it better, how do you do that? And we would say that the way you accomplish that is by studying Torah and studying the words of the sages, the rabbis, the people who have spent their lives trying to be more godly. So when we're reading, for example, this book, Brit Shalom, right? Ultimately, and it's funny, we like this is the exact discussion we were having on the Discord in general earlier today, right? Like, when do you go to a rabbi? You only go to a rabbi when there's a doubt. Like the Bible says that in Deuteronomy 17. It says, when you have a doubt, you go to the judges that are there, right? If there's no doubt, there's no doubt, right? So if you know something is idolatry or not idolatry, then that's between you and God, right? But the question becomes, okay, well, what is this? Is it a problem if I have a crucifix in my house? Well, I mean, if you're asking me, yeah, a crucifix is a problem because Christians look at that. I mean, I don't mean to be offensive, but like God on a stick, right? It's like, there's my God crucified, like dead God. It's like, hello, this is, if you ask me, it's a problem. If you're not asking me, you're not asking me.
Right. Yeah. And I think I'm pressing you to own that. And I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'm just curious. Okay, you go, Sandy.
So I don't know. I look at the world that we live in, and I look at some of the places that we've had opportunity for discussion. Some Discord, yes, for me, some other places. And you said, yeah, I understand, but I'm pressing you to own that. But this is your God and your worship and your things. And it relates back to my question with my son. Is it my job to push him on how he owns something? No. When we go to visit his dad is in a Catholic long-term care. Every time I go to visit him, and I'm walking in the main spaces, I have to pass, I don't know, I haven't really counted, and I'm not planning on counting, but probably somewhere between 3 and 20 different images, pictures, statues, and other stuff, because it matters to the people who are related to that particular form of religion, that they are there. But if I make a big deal out of the fact that they're there, I'm already owning it. And that's where I think the reference Jacob made to Deuteronomy comes in. Then at that point, if I start to own it and question, oh, does this matter that I walk past them? I am here. And I haven't really thought it through in terms of this material and what we've been provided already. Then I go to the rabbi and ask, which is something I did on something else.
And then the
It has to, engage it.
but
Not
specifically with you, he's going to engage and say, okay, one
Mm.
second, who's talking to me? A Noahide. Great. Why is she in that hospital? Okay, now I understand. So all those things will now decide specifically on that case how it wants to respond. Eventually ending with, well, would it be ideal that you don't have to go there? Yes. But it could even be the flip side. It could be in Sandy's specific case, the ideal is for her to go back there. And there's room for that in that case.
Yeah, and I got to go back as we lost my the lonely man of faith that I loaned to my ex, and it's somewhere in that building.
Hopefully,
and I said to them, "Don't worry about it too much. Maybe somebody's reading it."
All right.
And I'm like,
we'll continue with 22. And Trey, any other specific questions? Obviously, feel free to shoot them up on the Discord.
Okay.
22. It is best to refrain from cutting one's hair and beard in the manner of idol worshippers, which Jacob throws at me at sometimes, and from tattooing or disfiguring one's body in any way as they do. The same applies to making a bald spot on the head or gashes on the body as a sign of mourning for the dead. If a coin falls for someone's pocket when next to an idol used for idol worship, one should not bend down and pick them up. Rather, one should sit down, then collect them. So here too, again, there is a very big focus on how one is behaving, how is one being seen, because my actions, my intentions, they all have ripple effects. There's the way people perceive me and what they're going to think is of course very important. But there's another sense over here, which, because I don't know how common these haircuts anymore or disfiguring one's body anymore in let's say the general public. These things are definitely used to happen in the past, like a friar's haircut. So I don't know if that's happening as much. However, there's a sense which both for Jews and for Noahides, we're not looking to identify like everyone else. We want to maintain our specific identity with God. And successfully what Jews have been doing definitely for 2,000 years in exile, creating communities. That's why a community for Noahide is so important, because not only are you different from others, you're also actively trying to not identify like them. And that is very lonely if you're doing that alone. So it is, and obviously easier said than done, but the model of the Jews in the diaspora over the last 2,000 years is a model for Noahides in a certain sense, where you want Noahides to get together, create their own court systems, get their own sages, open up their own schools, which will then allow them in a much more comfortable sense to not be worried about these actions or imitating others or doing like others, because they're going to have their own culture, their own community as well. So I know obviously, and this is, it's something also important to think about, which is, none of you guys have to answer this right now, which is there's real life touching grass, as the kids say, right? So you can experience your Noahide once you turn off this screen and go about your day. But there is a sense where even this online could be a robust community. And you all have to think how you guys want to take advantage of that. And yes, there are limitations due to physical distances between you, but there is a lot that can be gained on the internet from places like this. So I think it behooves all of us, but those of you that are searching, to really ask yourself, how do you build this community more? And of course, Brit Olam is trying to offer keys for that and tools for that, not keys for that, tools for that. But it also matters what you guys need, right? Like, how does that look like? And even to the sense of, Chezi, we want to have a group of 15 of us all together, and we want to have an evening of prayer. I don't know what it looks like, but you have to think to yourself what that looks like. What would be beneficial for you? How do you build a community that safeguards you from these things as well? So obviously we're all working on that together, and hopefully we'll be successful in that as well. 23, Antonio, you want to take it with footnote 73?
Did you want me to read the footnote?
23. Yeah, read 23, and then we'll move into.
Oh, okay. It is best to refrain from eating and drinking food and drink that was used in idol worship, and likewise to avoid eating fruit from a tree planted by idol worshippers with the intent of worshiping said tree. The same applies to deriving benefit from gold or silver used to coat anything used in idol worship, and even to the ashes remaining after objects used in idol worship were incinerated.
Even the ashes after they're incinerated. Well, intense comment over here. All right. What does 73 give us here, Antonio?
And there are those who hold that regarding Noahides, all prohibitions to derive benefit from idol worship are prohibited according to the letter of the law, and not only as a matter of proper conduct.
Okay, so here are more intense. So Bill was asking about certain things in his house, right? So arguably you could be like, here, there's a certain opinion that is a lot more hard line, right? And what we are reading and what Brit Shalom is offering is what we're reading in the section 23 is saying this is the opinion they're taking or they're promulgating. However, they're of course mentioning other opinions over here, and there are other Noahide communities that might go according to this position. And within Noahide communities, between each other, they have to realize and respect this tension as well. So Jacob, in a loving fashion, could come and call me certain names or come and say that what I'm doing sounds crazy. However, he and I know that he's saying that in the context, which is that's nuts. But of course, I understand that that's still that was a fair move that you pulled off. I'm just not interested in that move. But I'm still part of the community. I'm still part of the minyan. I could still marry his daughter, so to speak, because of that. So it's very hard sometimes to understand because that tension seems very scary. And there are Noahides out there that sometimes come to other Noahides, which they seem are more lenient and call them out for this. So this is a big no-no, right? We don't want to be doing that. That is not recommended. We want to be coming with peace and love. But generally, with regards to the section we read, so it's a continuation of section 21, which is, again, anything that has to do with idol worship, we just want to stay away from completely, taking into consideration what we said in 19, which is all these little acts, even though they're not the explicit idol worship things we read in the last class, they still leave a spiritual effect, and we take that very seriously. Our actions, our words, our behaviors, they all have an effect. So us participating in these things, again, there's leniency when needed in the right context, but generally speaking, we want to be avoiding this at all costs. Well, not at all costs. We want to be avoiding it. 24. One may not make an idol for oneself or for others to worship. No object used in idol worship should remain in one's possession. So that is as clear as it comes, I guess, right? We don't want to be doing any idols. I'll just mention well, I guess I see we're mentioning it over here, number 25. So we'll just go into number 25. Jews are forbidden from making a sculpture in the form of a complete human being, even if only for decoration. However, there is no prohibition to be in a place where an ornamental sculpture is on display, and it is even permissible to appreciate such a sculpture as a work of art, right? And I'll just read over here, footnote 79, which says, according to the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, Hilchot Melachim, this prohibition by law applies to Noahides too. However, Chatam Sofer responds of Yoredea says, permits this activity for Noahides, right? So again, two completely different opinions that create a completely different reality on the ground. And here too, one should look at this as, when in the right context, when do I access these truths? Right? Both could be true at the same time in the right context with the right individual and the right person. And wait, this was number 25. Right. So, for example, as some of you have seen, I have some statues, figures, busts in my house. And the way it's possible for me to have these busts in this house is because they are not complete. Right? My statue of Michelangelo's Moses is broken by the tablets. And I have different statues of different rabbis, and they are chipped or nicked specifically to because of that, because I don't want to create this complete version of this thing as well. And again, it's totally permissible for one to rely on the Chatam Sofer's opinion, while recognizing that there's another community that might be relying on the Rambam, and that's why it's very important to, as we say always, to, when the time comes, locate a rabbi for yourself or a Noahide sage when that becomes relevant, so he could guide you in your specific cases. I would even mention about this last section over here that there is no prohibition, about seeing a sculpture or even appreciating such a sculpture. So there is a blessing, one says, when he sees beautiful creations or trees, and you say Baruch shekacha lo be'olamo, that God has this in His world. There's even a Rabbi Gamliel, that saw a beautiful woman and said, Marabu ma'asecha Hashem, as in how plentiful are your actions in this world. So that is like a more extreme position because generally speaking, you shouldn't be looking at women. But the point was to show that, and this rabbi, because he was a rabbi, managed to differentiate also between, let's say, looking at her in lustful ways and just appreciating, let's say, the biological symmetry. But having said that, when I'm walking with my wife and we in the Duomo and we want to appreciate the architecture, or we see Michelangelo's David, I'm allowed to come and say, wow, this is beautiful. One could ask, do you want to be hanging out in the Vatican all the time? Do you want to be hanging in the Sistine Chapel constantly? So these are obviously questions. There are different opinions, but here you're seeing at least an opinion which is allowing you the place also for Jews to appreciate art of sculptures as well. So it's important I believe it's important for the Torah to recognize that beautiful acts of art manifesting from people, from their creativity, are also manifestations of God in a certain sense, or of His wisdom. Jacob, anything to say about that? I see a squirmy face. You're mute. Still mute.
I'm just wondering. You're not actually saying that chas v'shalom you walked into the Sistine Chapel.
I was in the Sistine Chapel. However,
Shem Yerachem.
Ready for it. When I went with my wife to Rome, we did Rome for Jews with a Jewish guide, and you go through Rome, but it's always in the context of what's happening with the Jews at the time. So you're in the Colosseum, and it's the Jews involved in building, the money that was pillaged from the temple for erecting this. So it's always happening in that context. So if I'm in the Sistine Chapel, we're looking inside and we're seeing how Michelangelo actually put in different hidden faces, trying to mock the church, and how it's the exact size of the tabernacle. So I'm looking at it in that way, and I'm looking for the divine sparks. And I was trying to get down to the Vatican to find the menorah, the stolen goods from the temple. I wasn't successful. 26. I see we're past an hour, but does anyone need to go? I want to power through till finishing the chapter. Okay. Jews are forbidden to predict the future by means of magic, to bring about change in nature through casting spells, to raise the spirits of the dead and communicate with them, or to practice witchcraft in any of its forms, including Magic the Gathering. The Torah called these and all similar activities an abomination to the Lord. As it was stated, go in perfect trust with the Lord your God. It is also improper for Noahides to occupy themselves with these activities, even though they are not forbidden according to Noahide law. And again, you're going to see this again and again and again, because they're not forbidden, right? So it's always leaving this opening for this journey that one is going through as well. But what we're saying over here, obviously, we are seeing the dark side of the fourth, that the Torah is recognizing and is understanding. As we mentioned in the past, there was the prophet Bilam, who was aware of these powers and how to manipulate them as well. Or we have famously the story of the witch of Endor that King Saul goes to bring up the prophet, to bring up his soul, even though he was supposed to get rid of all the witches and the mages. There was one that he left so he could communicate with. But the way this ends is beautiful, because in a certain sense, you could come and say, Chazi, they're talking Harry Potter over here. They're saying it's real. Like, isn't this intriguing? And the answer is no, because we say, as stated, go in perfect trust with the Lord your God. I'm not interested in anything that's happening in J.K. Rowling land. I trust in my relationship with God. I see the world through his will, through the prophets, and through the Tetragrammaton. I don't need the constellations. I'm not interested in hacks of shamans and Kundalini yoga, right? Things that are relevant over there. Again, the divine sparks we will rescue them. But other than that, whether or not these things, even today, are relevant or exist, we are not interested in them, because we don't lack trust in our way. We don't lack our trust in God. So if someone invites you to a seance, just say, it's just not relevant for me, because I don't have the kind of doubt I even have is still within the realm of the doubt that God allows me to have in my relationship with him. Not a doubt that I'm looking and trying to see what my grandmother says from beyond the grave, so to speak. Trey, you all right? You're just interested in this magic. All right.
Cool.
27. Jews were commanded not to turn toward or investigate idol worship, not even consider that there were anything real about it, and not even to look at it. So this goes back to, again, like, Ben Chazi, what are you and Jacob doing talking about Christianity? And why are you giving quotes from the surah or the hadith? Well, that's not considered idol worship, but let's say Christianity. And why are we participating in these things? And this also, again, this relates in a certain sense to the tensions within the Noahide community, and in a larger sense, interfaith dialogue. So with regards to the Noahide, so we're saying over here, don't deal with this, don't talk about this, don't engage with this. So Sandy could ask, but my son's asking me a question, right? I'm not going to engage. I'm just going to ignore him. So the answer is no. We don't want to destroy the family. It's super important. It would be devastating if that's what happened. So in laboratory conditions, yes, don't do that. In reality, like we said, it's dynamic. Now, with regards to the interfaith conversation, which is like, can't I see the value in these other religions, or can't I appreciate these things? So there's a sense where interfaith conversations are like Jacob calls it, kumbaya, is not what we're looking for, because that talks about us coming from this position of equality. And while I could recognize that the Sufis or the Christian mystics and the Kabbalists, in certain sense, are playing with similar themes in some cases, I'm not coming from a position of equality. I'm coming from a position of superiority, because we are in Zion. The beam of light is shining on us. You could see now, again, unfortunately, in the world, again, Israel is center stage, unfortunately, for not the greatest conditions. But again, the conversation is being had around us. And we're no longer in a place where we need to plead to be heard, and in mock trials where eventually, if we prove the Christians wrong, we're going to get hung. Rather, we're in a place now and getting closer to Abraham's blessing, which is the nations of the world will be blessed through us. And it's our responsibility of delivering the word of God to the nations. So am I interested in conversations with Stephen DeYoung? Yes, but not because kumbaya, more because the more I talk with you in good faith, hopefully, the more you'll hear the message that Jacob is telling you, which is Acts 5, Gamliel. No, which is promulgating the truth of our religion and our relationship with God. So again, interfaith conversation, yes, but in the proper context. 28. Here we are. No one should swear, take an oath in the name of an idol. Similarly, no one should make someone else swear in the name of an idol, and someone who needs to swear in court should do so in the name of God, or in a simple manner that does not mention in whose name he's making this oath. So first off, just to recognize, be like, it's a very big deal if I make an oath, even if I'm making it in the proper God's name. if I'm lying, that's a very big deal, right? Because I'm provoking, I'm bringing down God's name. Like we said, all these actions and these intentions, they matter, right? So you're playing with fire, and fire could be fantastic, but we saw what happened to the sons of Aaron. Did not end well for them, right? They got consumed, and those were good dudes. Didn't work out well for them because they were literally playing with fire, and even provoking God's name in the wrong way is invoking God's name in the wrong way is detrimental. Then there's the fact that practically you could say, okay, Chazi, I'm in jury duty, or like I'm in trial, and they're asking me to make an oath on the Bible. So I think this also happens in the States. My cousin is a judge in New York, I believe, and he just asked them to bring an Old Testament, and that's what he made his vow on. There's another sense where you don't have to even use the word I vow. You could say I want to affirm. An example of this is in the army. At the end of basic training, everyone says Ani nishba. Like you read out this thing about serving the country in the army, and you say I swear. So all the religious soldiers in the army don't say I swear, they say I declare. And the reason is you'd be like, why can't you swear? Because we take that very seriously, right? We don't want to be going out. Whoever listens into the Pirkei Avot, we're going to be touching upon this. I believe we're going to be touching upon this this week. But there's a sense that even when someone swears, you don't want to necessarily come and ask him about it right there, because it's something very intense. You don't want to be coming and saying, well, did you think about the oath in this way? And then he might take that on as well. Like you have to be very sensitive to someone swearing or taking an oath and doing this seriously. And that's why in Judaism, we try to avoid that at all costs unless we have to. And